Welcome back to the Extra Rep Podcast, guys. I'm Josh.
I'm Liam.
So today, what we're going to go through is training for beginners. So with training for beginners, obviously it's a bit different. There will be a lot of you in the gym who, when we classify beginner, I guess we should start with saying, okay, well, as a beginner, you are not just someone who hasn't touched a weight before. If you've been away from the weights and you're coming back into weight training after, potentially like 6 months or more off, I would then classify you as a beginner again. So this is for someone who, again, is either getting back into the gym after a long layoff or someone who is, completely new to the weights. And we're going to give you some practical stuff and then also some periodization, some sort of programming, roughly, to get you, sort of up and running to the races. But Liam, when we talk about, programming and programming for, I guess, individuals who are brand new, what do you sort of look for, or what do you think about when you're putting together your programming?
So I like that you mentioned individuals there because that's exactly where I was going to go. When it comes to a beginner, it always comes down to the individual of what they're actually trying to get out of the gym, what their goals are. Are they an athlete in a sport and they've actually just hardly ever been in the gym? They want sort of their resistance training to coincide with, increasing their performance in whatever sport they may be. Do they want more leg strength for soccer? Do they want more arm strength for tennis? Whatever it may be. Do they want more shoulder strength for baseball and pitching? Like, it really does come down to the individual. What I like to do with my beginners is, honestly, this may shock a lot of people, but I actually like doing a lot of lighter weight, higher rep stuff, because when someone's a beginner, they're going to be tapping into motor units that they haven't tapped into before, regardless of the weight, essentially. Just going through the motion on a certain exercise will be muscle hypertrophy specific. So I like to just actually program a lot high reps and get them doing exercises. Yes, they learn the basics of compounds, but I like to do a lot of machine and free weight exercises as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's funny you mentioned I guess the frequency and how often you want someone performing an exercise. Mm-hmm. Obviously, like, when someone's a beginner, we're really looking to get their nervous system to start just moving more and more effectively every single session. Yep. And the only way you're going to do that is probably by doing, more sets and reps. So if you're going to give someone who's a beginner, 2 sets of 8 reps, they're probably going to get stuff all out of it. Whereas if you're going to potentially give them, 3 or 4 sets of, 10 to 15 reps, for example, it's probably going to be a lot better. In terms of my experience with beginners, the only thing I would probably stray away from is going, above that sort of 15 rep mark, mainly because I find, depending on what the context is, but mainly I find that they will obviously stop pushing because it burns, as opposed to actual, sort of failure with what they're doing. So warm-up sets, yeah, you can go for a few and all that sort of thing, but when you're sort of getting into your working sets, I probably like that 10 to 15 reps max. I find that's a really good sort of barrier to entry. And then I'll talk about periodization with reps and sets and weight and things like that, just a little bit in the future. But in terms of beginner, I guess, programming in terms of that, do you think, do you do muscle group a day? Do you do full body? Do you do movement patterns? What does your sort of beginner programming look like?
Again, I like to, specialize it to the individual, but majority of how I'd program, and it's regardless if it's going to be an advanced or a beginner, I still like to program full body because, look, I don't think a beginner is ready for, 5 different exercises on a leg day. I think one exercise per muscle group can actually be really beneficial for a beginner.
Yeah, I think it's really, really good point you mentioned there, because that is, if you're someone who, again, has never trained before, and you go do 3 sets of leg extensions,
then
your legs are
curls, then squats, then calf raises. Yeah.
Your legs are going to be stuffed, right? Especially say you take someone from a leg extension straight to a leg press, right? And like any intermediate person can go and do that, no problem. But someone as a beginner, jump on the leg press and that leg press might just crush them because their quads are just not used to, being fatigued and then going into another exercise. So I think, like Liam mentioned, starting with one muscle and doing, a couple of sets of that, then moving to the next muscle. So really biasing more towards that full body programming where you can, hit one muscle, hit it well with a couple of exercises, get that motor unit recruitment and nervous system happening. And then you can get to a point of, okay, now I can be maybe adding in your hamstring curl to your leg extension. So you go, yes, opposite muscle groups, we're able to get 2 of them in a session. And then you can slowly bring those into the point where, you have your own, I guess, leg day. But then, of course, that goes down to frequency and a lot of other things. But as a beginner, I think the first thing is just getting into the gym consistently. A
Yep.
lot of people will be like, yeah, sweet, and beginner getting in, but then they'll have days where they're just, they're just missing days, and it's like, are you getting stronger? It's like, oh yeah, but I was meant to do 3 sessions. I did 1 this week. Then I did 3 the week after. Then it was back to 1. Then I did nothing. Then I did 2. Then I did nothing again. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to get back into it this time. I think the one thing I want to tell you guys is you have to be consistent. And there are going to be times where, yes, you may have to come in and maybe, if you're strapped for time, do 1 set of everything instead of 3, for example, that's programmed. But the consistency and habit of just getting into the gym and making it, at a regular time, same time of the week, that is going to do so much more for you than worrying about what exact exercise do I need to do, what muscle group do I need to train. Start with that consistency in the gym, and then things will be able to build from there.
Definitely. And look, if someone's a beginner and consistency is the most important thing, right? This is specifically why we mentioned we program the way we do, because if someone's so sore to the point where they can't walk for 4 days after, or they're like, oh God, is every time I'm going to go in the gym, I'm going to be this fatigued and sore after, it's going to deteriorate not only their results, but their motivation to go back into the gym. So we want to make sure they're consistently seeing results, consistently getting stronger, and overall actually enjoying their training program.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there is a lot to be said around, enjoyment as well. So, you will have clients as well. You're going to have the most optimal way where you're like, if you do all this and follow that, it's going to be perfect.
Yep.
No client's going to be like that, right? Everyone's looking for the most optimal path. But even myself, like my coach will program me something and I'll be like, geez, like I'll do it, but I don't really like it. And I knew if he programmed like say 8 exercises that I was like, not a fan of these at all, I know by week 3 or 4, like subconsciously, I'm probably not going to push as hard. I'm going to enjoy the process a bit less. So, even if they are the most optimal, exercises. So it is definitely a balancing act, especially as a beginner. If there's exercises you like and you feel like you're getting stronger on, stick with those. And then of course, once you get to a point of becoming more intermediate, then I think that's when it's like, okay, let's change a few things. Let's find out where your weaknesses are, which unfortunately, most of you don't want to do these exercises generally because you're weak at them. And we want to keep doing the exercises that we're really strong at. So you look at the example of an 18-year-old who walks into the gym, what do? Straight to the bench press, right? No, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But they'll get to a point where, they'll regress on the bench press and they probably need, some shoulder strength, some rear delt, rotator cuff strength. They need some upper back strength. They don't have any of that, right? Because they haven't been really training anything else to, the same level that they've been trying to improve their bench press. So it is something that, you do need to train muscles as equally as possible. And that is definitely a mistake that we probably both made when we first started training. It was just biceps and bench press like every young kid. And then, of course, you get, 5-6 years in, you go, oh, geez, really wish I worked on these other muscles and prioritize them, because then, again, you're going to need phases, and we'll talk about specialization.
That's a really good segue into like, all right, if you had a lagging body part for years because of mismanaged programming, or you just were too lazy to train legs, whatever it may be, then specialization phases can be something amazing when it comes into programming. And one thing I want to touch on with specialization phases when it comes to programming is you need to understand you're going to be tapping into motor units that you haven't got before. So let's say you're doing 3 different exercises for your biceps if you're trying to bring up your arms, and you've only been doing 1 working set of biceps, or like 1 preacher curl or 1 hammer curl, whatever it may be beforehand. Then it can be very hard to actually keep those motor units there after your specialization phase is over. So not only are you learning a skill of how to actually train a certain way, but you're keeping those motor units and those gains as well, because you've now recruited and tapped into them, and your nervous system knows, hey, I've primed this growth for like 12 different weeks now. Now you got to look at how do you keep it. And this is why specialization phases and learning certain programming can be really important for growth.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a separate podcast on that, because that'll be really good for you guys as well. But going into beginner recovery, I think that's one thing that is really, really underlooked. And I think there's a couple of things here. I think hydration is probably the biggest thing. Like people are just so dehydrated, especially as a beginner, because you don't know, right? You think like, oh, just drink a bit of water and I'll be fine. Obviously when we're in the gym, and we're trying to push reps and things are starting to get hard, hydration plays a massive, massive part in muscle contraction. So if we don't have that, and again, nutrients are going to play a part as well. And then of course, like we all know, protein, carbs, they're going to play a big part as well. And then of course you got, sleep and recovery as well. So, there is a few things that as a beginner, you will start getting better at, but this is exactly why when it comes back to programming, we go, okay, maybe one muscle per exercise, right? And a couple of sets. Because if we're pushing past that and the recovery is not there, it's one of those things that, again, can, sink you downhill, feeling sore for 2 weeks, all those sort of things. Of course, you are going to feel sore, especially the first time you've ever worked something. First time you do a leg day, you probably struggle to sit on the toilet. But as you go through and adapt and improve, things will progress as well. One thing I will quickly mention as well is in terms of like shortened and lengthened position exercises. So if you want to sort of, I guess, reduce soreness, the best way to do it would be to do more shortened based exercises. So when the muscle gets really short, like a leg extension, you will still be sore, of course, but it's probably going to give you less soreness than a hack squat, for example, because that's going to sit you really deep in that lengthened position. And that's generally what creates that, the soreness factor.
It accumulates muscle damage.
Exactly right. So the more muscle damage, generally the more soreness you're going to experience, right? And of course, again, when you're going back into programming, this isn't for beginner programming. We'll do an intermediate episode. But having some more shortened opposition can be really, really opposition. Jesus. Some more shortened exercises. Sorry, we had the UFC on in the background. Got opposition instead of exercises. We just watched the bloody fight. So
when I stumbled before in this podcast, when I was explaining specialization phase, the reason I stumbled was because it's like there's a massive arm swinging going on UFC, in the corner of my eye.
Sorry. So we go back to that. Shortened and lengthened position. Of course, we still want to do some lengthened stuff, but doing some shortened stuff as a beginner could be more appropriate, especially if you want to increase your training frequency. If you're training 2 times a week, you can probably get away with whatever you want. But if it's something where you want to get straight in the gym, 4 times a week, it's definitely going to be beneficial to at least look at the programming from a beginner standpoint. Anything to add to that?
Definitely. When it comes to beginners, and as you mentioned, recovery and everything, this is a skill that you should probably learn as early as possible. So understanding how much volume you can take, how much you can recover from, because the quicker you learn this, the faster you're going to progress, because then your coach knows your feedback, your own body knows your feedback if you don't have a coach, and you can program accordingly. You'll know that if you did 3 different leg exercises, and yes, you did one for quads, one for hammies, and one for glutes, and it was too much, instead of actually doing, okay, well, Monday I'll do quads, Wednesday I'll do hamstrings, and then Friday I'll do glutes, and you find you can recover better from that. It's just a really important skill that's going to carry forward your results.
Yeah, for sure. I think going into some beginner sort of program periodization now, I'm going to give you guys a really quick sort of, I guess, thing that I've used with clients before that I found has been quite successful. So, in terms of how, I guess, how many weeks you want to do this, it's going to differ by person as well with boredom. And if you're progressing, ideally, you'd want to go on these phases for as long as you can before you can progress to the next phase. So everyone would have seen it, the classic 3 times 10 to 12. I think is a great start for a lot of beginner people, because basically what it does, it gets you, again, enough frequency to focus on your technique and get stronger. And then you can, again, go between that 10 to 12 rep mark. If you can hit 3 sets of 12, next week you can up the weight a little bit, start at 10, and then you can just work your way back up to 12. So you can do that for, as a beginner, you could probably do that for 3 months, right? And be complete.
You can do it for a year.
Yeah, you probably could do it for a year. So again, try and milk that for, I'd say, as long as you can. But then this is when we talk about periodization. And again, this is very simplified. So let's say we did 7 exercises, right? 3 sets, so 21 sets, right? And we did it 3 times a week. Let's take this as an example. What we could then do in terms of periodization is we could go 4 sets. We could go 6 exercises. So we're reducing the total load. We're increasing the number of exercises. And then we're going for, it'll be 24 total sets. So we're still increasing it slightly. And then we're just going in that 8 to 10 rep range for the 4 sets. So again, we're getting a little bit heavy with the load. We're slowly increasing that as well. We're going lower in the rep range. And then from there, again, could probably milk another 3 months out of that potentially. And then you should really have, I guess, the capacity to do sort of heavier base lifting. We could go for 5 exercises. We could do 5 sets, and we could do 6 to 8 reps. As an example. Of course, rest times and that would all sort of differ as well, but I think that's just a really simple and effective way that you could start your programming if you wanted to go through your first 6 months of gym, picking exercises you enjoy, getting stronger at those. Obviously, when you're getting to the the 5 sets of 6 to 8 reps, potentially getting into some barbell work by then. Not that machines are bad or anything, but for example, if you're doing 6 to 8 on a lateral raise, for example, it could be something where you just might go, okay, leave it for a barbell shoulder press or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a combination of getting confident first with sort of machines, maybe some free weight stuff, and then working your way to getting under the bar. And I think the big three, as much as people now think they're not useless, but they're overrated, I still think getting someone in, getting them strong in a squat, bench, and deadlift, or a variation of the three, is going to be the best bang for your buck way to put on as much muscle and strength as possible as a beginner in the first 6 months.
Definitely. I 100% agree. And I actually want to just let beginners know, if there's any beginners listening to this podcast, if you're confident or you're with a coach or you're with a personal trainer, it's like, don't be afraid to still go heavy. We're not saying you have to do lighter weights and, do the specific programming the way we mentioned it. Like, if you still go heavy, you're going to get results, right? The only thing is, because you are a beginner and you haven't tapped into certain motor units, or you haven't learnt the skill of lifting a weight or the bar path or whatever it may be, the certain technique, the risk of injury is just a little bit on the higher end. And sometimes an injury is what can knock you out of your lifting career. So we don't want that to happen at all.
Exactly. And I think that's important as well as, take a bench press versus a machine chest press, for example. Are you going to be able to keep more tension on your chest on a machine chest press as a beginner compared to a bench press? Yes, probably, because it really isolates it compared to the bench press where there's a lot more going on, a lot more muscles involved. So, it is very different, but of course, you want to eventually get the best out of both worlds, don't you? You want to be able to bench heavy and then also jump on a machine chest press and full stack it, right?
Exactly.
That's, the best of both worlds. And then again, when we talk about intermediate programming in a future episode, we're sort of going to talk about, upper chest, lower chest, all those sort of periodization techniques that are a bit more advanced, intermediate advanced, that you guys can use to start, scaling your training even further, because you can definitely get a long, long way from doing 3 sets of 10 to 12,
100%.
but eventually there will be a time where you need to start doing some more, intermediate to advanced techniques to really, tap into new motor units and keep growing and keep progressing in the gym.
Yep. You need to learn the skill of lifting weight. It takes time to master, and it takes years and years and years. But the more you tap into that progression, you tap into different motor units, you tap into a different skill set you didn't know. And also you learn your threshold of what you thought, failure or your limits actually are.
And I think that's literally the last point I was going to mention is, when people say, train to failure or don't train to failure, I think as a beginner, it's really important, maybe every 4 weeks to go to your last set and go, I'm going to push this until I absolutely can't and do any more reps, safely, of course. So ideally a machine-based movement or, maybe like a bicep curl, just so how hard am I really pushing it? And let's say, for a bicep curl, okay, you got 10 reps at 15 kilos, 10 reps at 15 kilos, and you go, I'm going to push this last set. You get 17 reps. What does that tell you? It tells you that those first 2 sets you weren't working hard enough. So I think it's really important to train to or very close to failure very often once you feel really confident with your technique that's dialed in. So as soon as you feel like, okay, I'm pretty confident with this, I feel like I'm doing it right, start pushing that intensity, because that's what's going to get you the growth in the quickest way possible. And then, of course, progressively overloading that. You can't just do that. You've got to beat that next week and get stronger and continue to do so. And it's you against you at the end of the day. That's all you need to think about. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing in the gym. Don't worry about the biggest meatheads doing in the gym. Of course, you can ask people for advice. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you're not progressing in your own training, logging your own training as a beginner, that's the number one way to ensure that you're not going to grow any muscle.
Yeah. And speaking of yourself as an individual and don't worry about anyone else, I will say one really good thing for beginners is to film their lifts. It sounds tedious. It's can be a bit nerve-wracking for people. Trust me, other people really don't care. But actually filming your lifts and seeing your set, seeing it in real time, seeing either the mistakes you made or anything like that, and even psychologically knowing that you're going to be watching this back, you may actually push a little bit harder than you knew that you wouldn't before.
Yeah, for sure.
Or your form would be a little bit better than it wasn't before.
100%. I think that covers it.
Yeah, I'd say that covers it.
Awesome. This is also episode 50.
Is it?
Yeah, so halfway to the 100. I read a stat actually, and it was, 6% of podcasts make it to their first 50 episodes. So hopefully we've done something right and we've been to help you guys out. But Of course, if you guys have any questions in terms of beginners, periodization, how to do things with your programming, even if you just have, you got a random program off the internet, right? And you're like, Josh, Liam, whoever it is, I just need some help. Is this right for me? Should I change things? We're more than happy to help. So feel free to reach out. Me on Instagram at Action Fitness Nutrition, or Liam at Coach Liam C. Murphy. And lastly, if you are enjoying the podcast, guys, if you've liked the last 50 episodes, please share, like, subscribe, do all the things, share it with your friends, with your family. The more we grow, the more we can give great information out to everyone, get your training harder, losing fat, building muscle, doing all the right things. So really appreciate you guys being with us for the first 50 episodes and look forward to the next 50. So we will see you in the next podcast.
Thanks, guys.